Hi everyone. Thank you so much to Suzanne and to Dr. Roll for presenting this information. It's super interesting, and I think there's a lot of data for us and a lot of ideas for us to dig into. My name's Christine. I'm going to be moderating this discussion today. But before we begin, well actually I'll let my panellists introduce themselves and then we'll crack on.
Hello, I'm Sky Deep, and musician, DJ, and also festival organizer, event organizer in general. I'll start with that.
Hi, my name is Marlene. I'm a festival organizer and music curator from Vienna. Hi.
Thank you. Before we begin, we just wanted to read a bit of a prepared statement. As you may be aware, Annie Go has decided to withdraw her participation from this panel and from this festival for political reasons. And she's made that statement clear on her Facebook profile about her decisions there. And within the Female Pressure Network, we're used to dealing with different views and standpoints. We like to debate and exchange ideas, and often we come to similar conclusions, but sometimes we don't. Nevertheless, our network is based on mutual respect, mutual learning and acceptance. At this time, Female Pressure does not have a long version of a statement. It would be impossible for us to cover such an important and sensitive topic in this short time frame. So for today's event, we'll focus on the subject of the panel, which is the facts survey. And afterwards, each members of the Female Pressure Network that have spoken today will privately decide on what level they wish to continue that discussion. So let's get cracking. I guess as a very general entry point, both of you as festival organisers, was there anything within that data that particularly stood out to you or was surprising to you from the information that we just heard?
I'm not surprised by any of it.
Right.
It was more interesting to hear about the process and the many different ways of, many types of attempts that it took to get in touch and to find the data. Yeah, but it looks to me like it stayed the same pretty much. I mean, like small changes, but.
Yeah, but overall the differences were, I mean the overall difference, kind of the increase, as Suzanne said, from 10% to 17% is a pretty huge increase, but overall the differences were not that extreme. Is that kind of something similar for you as well, Marlene?
Yeah, totally.
Okay.
Not surprised, and I guess that's already a sad thing.
Yeah. I wanted to ask you first of all particularly about the Hyperreality Festival. If you could explain a little bit about the festival itself and also the strategies that you implement to ensure that there is gender diversity and diversity in general with all of the participants there.
Well, Hyperreality is a festival for club culture that happened the first time this year. Before that, I was working on like more autonomous projects, Donau Festival and Elevate in Austria. And Hyperreality is sort of different. First of all, because we feature a number of showcases, this means one of the strategies in order to like present certain scenes and subcultures authentically is by letting them speak for themselves. So like we have all these like minor co-curators like Ghetto Gothic this year who did their own showcase and all of that. So I think that's really important to have people speak with their own voice, even when it comes to programming and designing lineups. Then one major part of the festival is like sort of like the microcosmos of the festival is really important to me. Like whenever I'm going out in Vienna, like there's so many guys everywhere in the structure of organization, you know, like bouncers, the office, the management jobs. It's not only the lineups, it's also like the whole sort of like structure and infrastructure of club culture that's extremely male and hedonistic, and we put a big focus on changing that as well. Like we had 50% female bouncers. We looked at who's working the bars, who's doing all of that, and I think it's really important for every one of us too to sort of like change that microcosmos. Like for me at least, when I go into a room and there's like 90% men, I immediately notice it. I get all edgy. I'm like, what's that? So I wonder how nobody else could do it, not do it, but maybe that's just me. So yeah, that's the festival, and yeah, I guess my microcosmos is very diverse and queer, so this just naturally doesn't really happen to me. I'm not like sitting there creating the lineup, counting. It's just like a reality I can't reproduce, or I don't know.
I mean, I think that's a really important point, is of people of diverse backgrounds creating these microcosms that represent their own communities. And I definitely want to ask you, Sky, as well, a similar point, but I think this is a really important issue when it comes to looking at data-driven studies, which are within themselves super important and super valuable. But I think that there is perhaps, and this is something we can discuss, perhaps like a idea of getting kind of bogged down in the data about this specific thing. But I had some general statistics about electronic music that I have kind of compiled over time, and I just wanted to put these out there as thinking points, as talking points. So, for example, in 2016, Dekmantel, which is a Dutch festival, booked 7 female artists and 76 male artists for their Dekmantel Selectors event, which I believe is happening right now. Which is a smaller, more boutique offering to the bigger festival, with the main selling point being that these are the creme de la creme of underground DJs and people who define it as an art, hence the name Selectors. DJ Mag, their silver anniversary edition of 2016, so it's been going for 25 years, featured 25 pioneers on the cover that featured no women. And some previous editions of that poll have featured no women at all, and this is decided by public ballot. Resident Advisor's 2016 polls featured 7 women in the top 100 DJ list, 0 women in the top 50 live acts list. That was also decided by public vote. I believe in 2016, a DJ, high-profile DJ, somewhat controversial DJ by the name of Jack Master, posted a widely shared series of tweets about his personal observations that included, "Tonight was the first time that the plight and or prejudice surrounding females in the music industry truly hit home and resonated with me." And lastly, there was a Nielsen poll of 2014 where 55% of electronic music listeners are male and 45% are female, which I think is a pretty alarming set of statistics kind of in combination to what we've just seen from the FACT survey. So, moving on to you, Sky.
You trying to make me raise my voice.
Let it rip. Let us know what you're thinking.
Well, as so many things run through my head. I mean, first it's like, as a person who is not only behind a desk or just a person in the audience, but also a person that plays out, I know that these are not the realities because I know what I see around me on a consistent basis. But the things that you were mentioning there are directly also related to why I created Reclaim the Beats Festival. Because I was tired of seeing the same representations over and over and almost never seeing a reflection of myself or the other people that I saw around me doing similar work. When I hear the numbers that you just put out there, I immediately went into the subdivisions of it, into, okay, so if we talk about 76 men and 7 women, I go, okay, now let's break that down a little bit more. How many out of the 76 men were men of color? How many, then we can break it down. How many of them were queer? How many of them were non-binary, trans, so on and so forth? And then when that's out of 76, and then when you go to the number of the 7, we can't calculate fractions of people.
Right.
And this drives me crazy.
Right.
And so I had to make a festival to try and pretty much do the exact opposite of that. And that's kind of like, to make a point, but also to provide space and opportunity and a platform. Yeah.
I mean, I guess I totally understand what you're saying, but in terms of making this kind of data, whether it relates to facts and the survey that they have, the really exhaustive and highly detailed survey that has been pulled together, or looking at particular festivals like the Deckmantel example that I just mentioned. How do you, in both of your opinion, how do you think that we take this from being statistics or going to a festival saying, here is our list and you rated really badly or you can improve? How does it become actionable, I suppose, is what I'm asking.
Well, they have to care. Like, there's a level of humanity, first of all, that has to peek through, because data and numbers are proof so that nobody can say, no, that's not the case. But then they actually have to be willing to be sympathetic towards that, to want to see it be different. And whenever it comes to a more even distribution of wealth, whether that's a wealth of time or space or money, the people that have a little bit heavier hand are not always so interested in giving that up.
Right. Yeah, it was interesting when we were looking at that statistic earlier of the difference between, I think it was 2012 to 2017, where it had increased for women from 10% to 17%, whereas for men, sorry, I don't have the page in front of me, it had decreased from 80-something to perhaps 70-something. And I think that it's interesting to me that these conversations can also be framed in another way, where I was recently at an event where one of the people involved in it was kind of raked through the hot coals recently for making some pretty disgusting sexist remarks. And in having conversations with people, some of the attitudes being put forward were like, well, this opinion is being held because it's taking away from people who deserve it, or it's taking something away. Like, how do you think this can be framed in a way that doesn't encourage this defensiveness or this feeling of being disadvantaged in some way? Blank faces.
Well, going back to Deckmantel, I'm actually surprised about that information too, because the festival has sort of like a different image, I would say. Like, it has this sort of like more cool, interesting image when it comes to electronic music. And I was wondering what I would do if they would invite me now. Like, just thinking about that, and then I thought about an artist we worked with at Festwochen called Fanny Sosa. She gives workshops, and she like only gives workshops for POC people. And she had a problem with a different festival in Vienna because they couldn't find enough people who were signing up for her workshop. Like, and then they asked her to like open up a workshop to white people, and she immediately cancelled. And she didn't do that to confront the festival. She did that because the problem is that the festival has the mission to find these people. And why is your festival only addressing these people? Like, how did that happen? So her statement wasn't like, okay, you're stupid, or you're asking something wrong. It's more like, you have to work on yourself. So I would also confront these people. I'd be like, okay, you want me to play there? I don't know. Like, I don't know if I would immediately cancel. Just have to find something between the radicalness of a Fanny Sosa and between just like going there and playing a game that we're obviously all tired of. So.
Yeah, so I guess it's a question of finding this way of encouraging a discourse so it's not abandoned and it's not inflamed. And I know that for certain events and for certain arguments that this idea of quotas has been implemented, or future goals, or even things like, 50-50 gender parity. In both of your experience, having curated and put together events for yourself, like, how feasible do you think that is? In a very real sense, if you're the person who has to get together an event by a particular time, like, how feasible is it to look towards a numerical goal?
I personally think it's totally feasible. I do say it can be a challenge if, like, a lot of times as an organizer, your easiest route to discovering talent is by recommendation, or sometimes what's around you. And yes, you get submissions, but if you're being a curator, sometimes you have like a certain type of overall grand picture in mind, right? And when you're looking to fill certain slots, it takes, research takes a lot of time if you're not already tapped in. So the key in my point of view is that it starts with community outreach, and everywhere where marketing and PR money is being spent needs to find a redirect to create the diversity in the audience too. A lot of those numbers that you came up with were based on vote. Yeah, well, who's voting? The people that are voting are the people that are using that platform, that the people that advertisers consider to be their target buyer. Yeah, so the people were not targeting or succeeding at reaching the crowd that was necessary for this particular workshop that you mentioned. And maybe they never had to think about that before, but now they will think about it, right?
Hopefully.
Hopefully, we hope. But yeah, it does, like, unfortunately, the festival can't happen, not any of these big ones, without money, without sponsors. So it's sort of like these quotas or whatever, they are possible if the people that can green light a project put something on it that says this is one of our requirements. Mm-hmm. Will they do that? Are they doing that? I think that as people like us who care, because whoever's in this room cares about this, as we all step forward into our careers, our jobs, or as we continue to connect with our friends and family, and then they go into their respective jobs and places, and whoever's head of marketing and PR or sponsorships at that corporation or whatever, we can start injecting new ideas in there that can put, I guess, more incentives to festivals and people who are receiving the funding. But so far it seems like only mostly public funders are doing stuff like that. But it's possible to find the people. They just need the motivation. If they're not just moved in their heart to do it, then the people with the money have to say, hey, so if you want this carrot here, then you got to do a little dance for us.
Okay, so by that idea, the onus is as much on the festival organisers as it is with any of their commercial partners that may be involved. Yeah.
It's just one possible strategy.
Is that something that resonates with you, Marlene?
Yeah, totally. It does resonate with me, but just a different thought. A friend of mine recently talked to me about politics and how political ideas, like how we shouldn't like just take these topics because they come from a patriarchally built system already, but actually make up our own. So always like thinking, is that true for my work too? Like festivals, fundings, and the way we build, is that already something that's built by men and patriarchal? And maybe should I rethink that whole structure too? And maybe because I work at a large festival, there's marketing, press, and all these like different intersections. That again is a system that's not built for culture, but actually built for capitalistic companies. That's where this divide comes from. Mm-hmm. So I'm trying to spend more time thinking about how to, like, from the ground build something that's different to me and that works maybe more fluid and maybe, but not so many solutions yet. We just tried a lot of Hyperreality by doing different structural stuff, but still I'm working in this context and it's still organized like that. So I don't know, but just a thought.
Kind of like tangenting off this topic of working with sponsors, perhaps commercial sponsors, because it seems like this topic of gender diversity within electronic music is kind of a hot topic at the moment. There's a lot of discussion about it, a lot of debate about it, a lot of trolling about it, but there is also this sense of initiatives and kind of resources being pulled towards this issue by commercial entities who may be using this as kind of a marketing ploy, like it's something that is kind of a hot button topic. And because of that, I'm wondering how this attention that's being given to gender disparity and diversity disparity in general, how do you think this conversation can be as long-lasting as possible rather than it being something that's just kind of like focused on at a particular time?
Yeah, like a trend, like a fad that just fades out.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, yeah, I have this fantasy of the ethical sponsor, you know. It scares the shit out of me every time somebody says to me, you know, now's the time. Now's the time. Corporate money is into projects like yours right now.
Right.
And I'm like, eek, like, that's not it. And like right now, we're a very small festival. Last year was our first year. We're going into our second edition this year. And we have public funding from 2 organizations. And it's small, and I'm learning, and I'm growing, and I'm watching the bigger festivals to see what's going on. And I have to say, I don't want that money, because I know that it usually comes with special conditions that are not often are not meant are not rooted in my same cause. You know, like I would feel like I started working in music so that I didn't have to work for a corporation. So how can I organize an event that now I'm working for a corporation? Yeah, so for me that just doesn't quite work, but it's available. People are saying it's hot. Now's the time. And I'm like, you know, if a company comes along that can somehow provide evidence to me that they are ethically in line with the ethos and with the direction and what we're doing, then that means that that entity would be willing to also take some sort of a back seat, whether that means, no, your brand does not get to be on top of this. You get to be mentioned. You know, I don't know. Maybe that's unrealistic because no brand would really do that.
Right.
But that's my fantasy.
Right.
Just saying.
It's a beautiful utopian fantasy. But Marlene, like in your experiences, like with the first edition of Hyperreality, did you have any? I mean, did you take any sponsorship that wasn't just from cultural organisations or?
So Wiener Festwochen is subventioniert, like a funded festival.
Mm-hmm.
It has a long-year contract with the city of Vienna, so it's mostly public money, but there's also sponsorships from companies like Casino Austria, a big brewery company and all of that, and that was not my choice, but also I think one of the most important things with this kind of like topics is what I'm doing is redirecting money. Like I'm taking this money and I'm giving it to people that would otherwise, I think, not be sponsored by these companies at the moment. So that's the only justification I have for this kind of and what we do with it, and I think the message we're putting out is really uninfluenced by these companies and sponsors, and also by our funding partner. Yeah. So like I can freely work as a curator without their influence. And then when it comes to what you said, like so like marketing and companies supporting these topics at the moment, I also have a hard time making an opinion that's general and works for every kind of campaign. I think you really need to look at it. Today I was at a cafe in Berlin and there was a Tom Taylor poster saying you just have to change your perception. I was like, that's not really deep. And next to it was another Tom Taylor commercial with a guy on a moped and the girl sitting behind him, and I was like, okay, I can only look at this and this is fake. This is actually what you're saying. It's like a company trying to use these like queer and feminist messages and not even getting it. And if you look at it, you already know that that's fake. But on the other hand, if I have H&M taking Juliana Huxtable as a transgender DJ, performer and artist in their international campaign, I'm like, maybe that is something cool, maybe that's something that should be on a poster, maybe that is sort of like a feministic campaign that I can support even though I hate the company and everything it stands for. Like there I'm in a really difficult like I can't make up my mind. I don't know. Like I think it's good, and on the other hand, I fucking hate H&M and what that company stands for. So yeah, no idea. But then again, Julian Huxley, right? So
Yeah.
and that's how I go on.
Okay. I'll let you off the hot seat. Like that was kind of a difficult question for you to answer. But I wanted to kind of shift over to, I've kind of like put, 3 or 4 different headings, and this is about how to perhaps like not so much improve the survey, but to add more nuance to some of the details and some of the information that we heard about earlier. And there's this idea of encouraging contributions from the festival organisers, which Suzanne mentioned earlier, that one of the drawbacks was this idea of already busy people having another kind of item of admin to deal with, or potentially having an item to deal with that will put them into a negative light. Did you have any ideas about how that could possibly be counted, and how it can be a little bit more inclusive and a little bit more kind of collectively sourced? Did you
Actually,
have any ideas?
yeah, this point I actually couldn't wait to perhaps have a chat about, because I had a light bulb come up during that, which was, first of all, as I'm working 14 minimum hours a day in the organizing process of this festival. Every email that comes in is overwhelming, every single one. After a while, because there's just so many of them, as soon as you think you're gonna go pee, your phone is ringing. So the phone comes with me everywhere. And I think that the better way to possibly approach festival organizers is to provide a tool that they can use during their administrative process, that they don't have to think twice about, and it doesn't have to feel like a chore. Like, I'm sorry, when people send me surveys, I don't even read what it's about. I don't want to take a survey. Because that's like accounting. My mother was an accountant. That wasn't me. But if somebody gives me a template or a spreadsheet or something that's perfect, or I could alter it if I want, but that I can use during my booking process.
Right.
This could be really helpful. Mm-hmm. And we just add on the demographic boxes, and it's easy. And then I can just check it, and I can do my work, or I can have my assistants check it, or something like that.
Okay, so something that's easily integrated into the workflow that you already have through the process of booking. And I wanted to ask you the same question as well, Marlene, but I also wanted to ask, I thought it was an interesting point, this idea of festivals perhaps releasing more confidential or sensitive data, because my feeling is that I'm trying to sum this up in as few words as possible. I have an issue with the idea that women are only allowed to kind of be allocated a certain amount of space. Like, it feels like there are only a certain amount of female DJs or electronic music acts who can rise above a certain point, and it's almost like a one out, one in type of situation. And I think as a consequence of that is that you'll have, every summer festival wanting to book like the same 3 DJs, but of course, if it's only 3 people, they can only spread their resources so far. So just this idea of perhaps festivals releasing this data saying, we tried to book the Black Madonna, for example, but she was just really busy. Do you think that's something that would be feasible for festivals to make available for public knowledge? Or, I'm opening it up to the both of you.
Yeah, I wouldn't have a problem with making that information public, but it's also like third parties that would have to agree to that, I guess.
Right.
But yeah, it's natural. There's a lot of like touring and problems to find certain dates that work if people are like in a complicated schedule. Mm-hmm. That's natural. but also not an excuse. There's a lot of like so many female acts to choose from. I mean, just there's no possibility that I reach 7 acts like death metal because of scheduling problems.
Right.
So I don't know.
Yeah.
I would open it up, and in regards to the survey, I'm not so surprised that a lot of festival organizers wouldn't participate in a survey like that. Like, it's of course work, extra work, but at least maybe it's sort of like admitting to the fact that they have a problem, you know, like in the back of their head they know, okay, this is wrong.
Yeah, it's like a problematic conversation.
Like how we all
yeah.
know, okay, maybe it's not right that half the world is starving. Like we have this feeling somewhere sitting in the back here, and what I want to know is how to address it, maybe.
And I don't know, like in both of your experiences moving through events, and for you as a performer as well, have you had conversations with other event curators or other festival organisers about their lineups? Like, are these conversations that you're bringing into your day-to-day life as well, as you're just kind of moving around your community? And if so, what's the kind of feedback that you've been getting?
The stage that I'm at, my position, half the time I'm pretty psyched to just get my pinky toe in the door.
Right.
And I'm just doing my job and trying to show how it can be done. So, I don't want to take my time to do some sort of preaching thing, because often people don't respond well to that, but people do respond well to seeing something really cool and then going, oh, wait, oh, look at that. That looks different. And then I'll be like, yeah, it's possible. You know, as that's my flow.
Yeah, and that kind of relates to the point I was trying to make earlier, is this idea that a certain amount of women are kind of allowed to be present, but the onus necessarily shouldn't be on them to be the most vocal about highlighting this parity. I mean, I don't know, this is just something that I believe. I don't know if this resonates with you as well. This idea of whose responsibility or who should be the bearer of this kind of information. I think it's fantastic that Female Pressure and it has compiled this information, but just in terms of taking it out and talking to people and having chats with, you know, the booker in a DJ booth or going to an artist dinner beforehand, like, where should that onus lie of communicating this information kind of more consistently and frequently for both of you?
Regarding feedback and conversations with other festival curators, I don't know about that, but what I notice is, and I'm sure it's like due to actually data like this being released, sort of like that there is an international community, like also speaking about girls, that sort of like forms through these facts and these informations being made public. Like when I write with booking agents, especially female booking agents at the moment, they're extremely nice and we get along well, and I feel like this sense of community suddenly that I really like. And I think that's very wonderful and important too. So that's one of the nicer outcomes, and I think it's also thanks to information like this being made available. So yeah, it forms communities, and that is really important. And communities don't only exist through stats, but also through people.
Right.
Like the internet is no replacement for our communities, and I think it's wonderful that I'm getting in touch with people through this. So I think that will also maybe have an impact looking in the future.
Sky, did you have anything to add to that? No, I mean, I think, I don't have a ton to say about that other than it's important for us to keep showing up in every section of life and business, and for the voice to be shouting and whispering and telepathically beaming into your ear hole and stuff like that. As long as it's coming from every which direction, and it's all good, and everybody does their part, and we'll just keep making that number go up.
I like it. I like that, shouting and whispering. I'm going to remember that one. Well, I'd like to wrap up this section, then we're going to open it up to public discussion and public questions. But just for the both of you, any final thoughts on what this data that's been presented today, what it means to you, and what your kind of hopes for the future are. Obviously, apart from like a much more dramatic increase in future years, but where do you hope this kind of information takes us, widely speaking, in our scene?
Well, in the beginning, during the tech check, we were trying to decide on what backdrop we should have while we're talking here, and we thought maybe this was a good one. Again, these types of fact checks are. You can't ignore them. Like when you look at something like this, it's preposterous. It's outrageous. It makes no sense in relation to the population of the Earth. And so if we just keep blasting this shit everywhere, people not gonna be able to erase it. Plus, I really like it. It looks like an eyeball, so it looks like it's looking right at you. You can't escape.
Marlene, any final words?
You were mentioning the Black Madonna. I read an interview with her just a couple of days ago where she's talking about how she was in the music scene when she was very young, but didn't come to think of the idea to become a DJ until like really later on, because she thinks because there were no role models like that. So I think not only facts, but also just festivals like yours also happening, and people, just the existence of it will also spread it already, I think. And this year we had almost all-female rap stage with like 800, 900 people in Vienna, and it was absolutely crowded and fun, and I think we just take it from there and let these people speak for themselves, and I think it will be good. It's the right path at least, right? So.
Thank you so much, Sky and Marlene.